this brown bag lunch. But the purpose of doing this today is that we want to honor a really small and wonderful group of history-minded folks that lived in Jackson, and still live, some of them in Jackson County, that were on the Jackson County Historic Preservation Commission in 1993. So this is the 30th anniversary of the work that they did. And I think that that just is really important. And by the time we're done, I hope that you think so too. I'm gonna read the list of people that I believe that were involved. I hope that I'm not missing anyone on my list. Some of those people are no longer with us. Some of the people were Mary Pat Breitfeld, Dixie Clausen, Marlon Hoffman, Elaine Tubbs, Marty Jess, Dwayne Tim. I don't know Dwayne Tim, so I'm not sure whether he's still with us, and Belle Tubbs. I know those people are no longer with us. The people that were on this particular commission that did all this work that are still with us, and you can thank them, Mark Lawson, Mike Cotton, Bob Sheets, and our only Late Edwards, who I was hoping would be here today, but she had another engagement and she couldn't be here. And I think that at that time, Jack Willey was probably pretty new on the Board of Supervisors, but I think that he was also a part of all this. And what these people did, what this commission did was, they did their homework. And they received a grant from the State Historical Society of Iowa, and the money from this grant was used to do a very intensive site survey. A site survey of anything that was thought to be a historic site in Jackson County. And according to Belle Tubbs, they even looked at and photographed foundations of old buildings and things like that. Anything that they could find that was at all historic was part of this site survey. And then when they got everything gathered, all their information gathered together, I don't know how I can do something, not even move, but I did. They wrote a wonderful little book called Historic Places of Jackson County. I know I brought it down. Anyway, little white book, it's wonderful. Those copies have become fairly rare now. I'm told that some of the members of the Jackson County Historic Conservation Commission, and you're still on that, right, Jean? No, you're not on it anymore. Well, I think that they are working to reproduce this little booklet. And when you open it up, it has kind of a centerfold that opens out, and it has a wonderful map of Jackson County and all the places, little dots, for all the places where you can find these wonderful historic buildings. And they haven't been able to figure out how to reproduce the little map yet. But hopefully those booklets will be available to us again. But they're just a wonderful thing to have. And I wanted to show you a little booklet because on the cover is a wonderful drawing of our Hurstville lime kilns, and it was done by Rick Clausen. And so I just wanted to show you that. Today we're going to, these grants that they got paid for the printing of this book. They also paid for a slideshow that was produced, and it was taken to libraries and schools for them to educate about that. And then they did a 30-minute videotape that we're going to watch today. It just is wonderful to look at some of these historic properties from 30 years ago, when they were at least 30 years newer. They looked a little different than some of them do now. And I'm really grateful for Karen Brown. She's going to get that all ready for us. She found this treasure in our media room because I had forgotten that it was there. She hooked everything up. Richie Stimble, I know, made us a DVD copy of it at one time. And the old copy that we had was just a little fuzzy, wasn't it, Karen? I don't know. So Don Wentworth said that he had picked up a copy for a quarter at a garage sale somewhere. And his copy that we're going to see today is really, really nice and clear. So I hope that you will enjoy seeing this, and thanks to all those people. So watch carefully and think of any differences that you might notice. Differences between what was there then and what might be there now, and then when we're done, we'll talk about those for a couple minutes. So, Karen Brown.
historic structures of Jackson County are evidence of the determination of our early settlers to create buildings and homes of lasting value. The structures that remain stand as monuments to the pioneer spirit. Jackson County has 66 individual sites on the National Register of Historic Places and 4 designated historic districts. Terrain ranges from limestone bluffs exposed by deep cuts of riverine creek valleys in the east to the gently rolling hills of the center and west. The substantial buildings of our forefathers were constructed in the business centers of their day and where the farmland was fertile. In some areas, only remnants and dirt-covered foundations remain of once bustling communities. Where the buildings were kept secure to the weather, a window to our past remains open in the structures that survive. In Bellevue, the first building is the Haney Campbell Dairy. Its first use was to process salt pork for the river trade.
We're going to try to make it
The
louder.
building later served as a dairy and creamery, then a saloon, pool hall, and eventually a dwelling. At 505 Court Street stands this limestone house, which represents the high-style Gothic revival elements that are rare in this context. Delicate birch boards are found on the steeply pitched gable roof with balconies located outside the windows on the 2 primary facades. Springside was built by William and Sarah Wynkoop, local merchants, and stayed in the family for 51 years. Now a bed and breakfast, this home represents an example of classic rural Gothic revival architecture in its pure form and setting.
See some of those posters coming out, don't you?
The Jackson County Courthouse was built in 1845. It's now the elementary school. The Cooperman Building is the last of the limestone buildings constructed in Bellevue. Originally constructed as a dry goods store, it served as the City Hall and Opera House for many decades. At 101 North Riverview, Potter's offices stand. One of the earliest county commercial buildings, E.G. Potter managed his extensive and various business operations from this site. The Lukey Building at 130 North Riverview is an excellent example of commercial design from the 1850s. Joseph Lukey opened his boot and shoe business in 1857, and his leather goods were widely known. At 130 South Riverview, a 2-story limestone building housed the Bellevue Herald newspaper with its framed 3rd story added in 1905. E.G. Potter's Jasper Mills was built by Elbridge Jerry Potter to mill flour, and this 3-story frame structure housed an active milling business until 1969. The products of Jasper Mills enjoyed a national reputation. Nominated to the National Register of Historic Places in 1980, Potter's Mill has been restored and is now open to the public and houses a restaurant and gift shop. Traveling south of Bellevue, just south of the Bellevue State Park, stands the Dias family farm. Members of the Dias family entered Jackson County before the area was actually settled and built the family cabin in Christian Valley, just south of Bellevue. Other family members began to arrive in 1833 and all built within a mile of the cabin. The following years saw a series of 5 family homes constructed in the area. David's home was built of brick with a wood frame, and Robert and William built their homes with brick that was fired on the site. George and his brother-in-law Thomas Nicholson used limestone. This building is the Dias hexagonal barn. This unique shaped barn is one of a group of barns named to the National Register by Lowell Soike and included in his book Without Right Angles. The William Dias barn is one of 9 standing limestone barns in the county and is still in use. The barn is built into the side of the hill with a second floor door at ground level in back, a true bank barn. The George Dias house is the westernmost home in the group of buildings that is the Dias Agricultural Complex. This limestone home is one of the first examples of limestone architecture in Jackson County. The Kegler Gunner store in Springbrook was built about 1874. The store was in place when the post office moved from Old Springbrook to the present location. The store was built by the Wise brothers for Christian Kegler, and the 3 additions brought it to its present size. The Gunner family operated the store until 1990, and it continues as Springbrook's general store and post office. The Jackson County Jail in Andrew served the county from 1871 through 1879. The 2.5-story building housed the Jackson County Sheriff's Office with the cell blocks to the rear. The jailer's quarters were on the second floor with rooms for female prisoners on the top floor. The original arrangement is virtually intact. Nathaniel Butterworth had this stagecoach stop and family residence constructed in 1852. The stages were on their way between Maquoketa, Dubuque, and Iowa City. Ansel Briggs, Iowa's first governor, used this facility when he was a stagecoach driver and resided here from 1866 to 1871. There were many dances held in the third-floor ballroom with local fiddlers and great festivities for the area residents. The DeFreeze house is also in the area. This limestone residence was constructed for the DeFreeze family in 1858, and they added the barn and carpenter shop approximately 4 years later. The 2-story gable limestone house again has two double-end chimneys similar to the Butterworth home, and an added feature is the 4-star anchor irons in the facade. Carpenter shop with barn in the background are part of the complex. In 1870, the Jackson County Board of Supervisors authorized construction of a 2.5-story stone building to house the incurably insane in separate quarters. A hallway going down the center of each floor has doors opening into each of the cells. The doors and windows were fitted with metal grates. Thomas Sly House is the third in the area that was built by Christian Blessing. All that remains of the Bellevue Cascade narrow gauge is the Lamont train depot. The years 1877 to 1936 were the golden years for the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul narrow gauge. It was the lifeline from Bellevue to Cascade and one of 12 narrow gauges built in Iowa. The Lamont Depot held an important place on the line as the first stopping point for water after making the cruel pull up to Mill Creek grade. The Harris Wagon Works was built to house a carriage and wagon manufacturing facility in Lamont. It's now a bank. The St. Donatus Historic District. St. Donatus has become widely known as the Luxembourg Settlement and is the largest surviving collection of mid-19th century southern Luxembourg vernacular stone architecture in the United States. The blacksmith shop, and several residential structures of West St. Donatus. The Galen House and Barn are at the heart of the historic district. The Galen Barn was built first, and the families lived upstairs as well as travelers, and the animals were housed below. village of St. Donatus is the church. Built originally in 1858, this church has stone walls and is covered with a thin coat of stucco, a Luxembourg tradition. The High Bridge on High Bridge Road outside of St. Donatus crosses the Tatamore Creek at a particularly striking pass through the limestone bluffs. Heavy beam timbers support the bridge and are mortised directly into the limestone bluff. In 1852, Matthias Fritz erected the Fritz Chapel in thanksgiving for the safe arrival of his family of 8 after a terrifying sea and land voyage from Luxembourg. Between the Henry Rolling and the Theodore Neiman House stands the St. Nicholas Church and Cemetery. Henry Rolling and his family came from Ankrum, Germany, about 1838. They lived first in a log home which stands in the farmyard until this stone home was finished. E.G. Potter had this home built for John Robb, his foreman for the Upper Paradise Farms. The Big Mill Homestead is owned by the county and is nestled at the edge of conservation marshland. The basement houses building furnaces and ovens and was probably built as a dormitory for Paradise Farms. Paradise Farms was established in 1845. In 1846, Potter's home was built. The main house is a stucco-covered, 3-story flat-roof residence with a cupola. It houses the first lending library in Iowa, as well as Captain Potter's correspondence and business records. Paradise has been home to generations of his descendants. The 3-story rectangular dormitory housed the buttery, farm's main kitchens, and bunk quarters for the workers and is now family residence. The ruins of the carriage house. Upper Paradise was built for Lucius Byron, Potter's only son. It was never lived in. Near Otter Creek stands the St. Lawrence Church, built in 1883. A fine example of stone masonry from the 19th century. It was designed by an architect by the name of Hare, who had offices in Dubuque. With the rectory and school, we have an entire church complex. St. Patrick's Church was built in Garryowen in 1854. It's one of the first limestone churches constructed in Jackson County. This is an Irish Catholic parish established by Father Mazzucchelli, who is responsible for many of the churches in Wisconsin and Illinois. The Irish got along fine with the Italian priest, Father Mazzucchelli, and called him Father Matthew Kelly. The Maquoketa Caves became a state park in 1924, and the limestone buildings were built by the CCC in the 1930s. They include the Ranger House, the privies, the lodge, its retaining wall, and the entrance at the original Sagers Museum. The focus of the Hurstville Historic District is the group of 4 lime kilns, which are built against the face of a bluff and stand 80 to 100 feet apart. The Hurstville kilns are well-preserved examples of the draw or continuous kiln. The limestone was originally quarried to the east of the kilns from the bluffs which form the east side of a small narrow valley behind the kiln bluff. This site was abandoned when blasting threatened to topple the water tower. Production of lime from native stone was among Iowa's earliest industries. It was the standard material for masonry construction before the days of concrete. The Hurstville Historic District also included a boarding house, post office, general store, cooperage, blacksmith shop, lumber yard, and numerous houses for the employees, a complete company town. The city of Maquoketa has many fine examples that reflect the elegance and prosperity of their era. Their Hearst Hotel, the Sanborn Building with its Oriole windows, the Hearst Hotel was built in 1897 by a group of local businessmen. It anchors the south end of Main Street. The D.H. Anderson Building, the Taubman Building, and the Jackson State Bank. This bank is a very fine example of neoclassical bank design from the first quarter of the century. The Shaw Gallagher Building, Cundall Block, with its chamfered corner, was commonly used in bank buildings. The Ellis Building, built in 1896, and the Decker House, built in 1876. James Decker built this fine example of commercial Italianate design with the assistance of a New York architect. This was the largest and finest of the hotels built in Maquoketa the year immediately following the arrival of the railroads and the city's designation as county seat. The Lion Block, with its unique application of brick connecting arches, and the International Order of Oddfellows Building. The Mitchell-Maskery Mill was established in 1880. This building has been in continuous use as a mill since constructed and played an important role in Maquoketa's development. The Maskery Mill bought the original Frame Methodist Church and converted it into a mill. In the mid-80s, they built the existing 3-story brick building around the small frame church, with the mill operations continuing during construction. The Maquoketa Public Library, built in 1904, is built in the classic revival style and stands at the entrance to the West Pleasant Historic District. This Carnegie-funded library is a brick from St. Louis, and with the high stone foundation makes it a typical library design of the times. Entering the West Pleasant Street district, we first come to the home of the Judge House family. The D.C. Clary home. The L.B. Dunham home. Notice the Flemish Baroque window. The Mitchell house. The Carter home. The Dexter Field house and carriage house. Dr. Luce's home, now the Contentment Bed and Breakfast. And the centerpiece of the historic district, Squires Manor, built by local bankers. Now, Squire Bed and Breakfast. The Levi Keck home. The John Lake house. Tiles are a detail of the John Lake house. And the coined cornered George Cooper house. The Lydia Johnson house was built in 1890. This fine frame Queen Anne style house was designed by a Davenport architect. Lydia was the wife of a local physician who left her and moved to Oklahoma while she retained the house. She was a prominent clubwoman and held many Federated Women's Club meetings of the area at this residence. Our last home is the Basnet Nickerson home and dates from the 1870s. It reflects the influence of the popular Italianate style. This presentation reflects a cross-section of the registered historic sites in Jackson County and is one phase of our ongoing effort to record and share our heritage. Our goal is to increase public awareness and heighten interest in our county's historic fabric. It is our hope that this interest will lead to identification of additional sites and further preservation of our heritage.
Thank you, Karen Brown, for finding that for us. Yes.
I want to mention, you had said that you didn't know who Dwayne Tim was.
Yes.
But his business in town, he had a business in town, and they actually handmade historic wallpaper.
Is that what, okay.
And so the Bridges of Madison County, he actually did the wallpaper for that movie.
Okay,
So I
thank
just
you.
wanted to add that.
Thank you for that. And I know that he did wallpaper for Squires Manor, and I know that several other people have used it. Thank you, I just didn't have the name with the thing, I appreciate that. Just so you know, with the Historical Society are so maybe interested in National Register places, partly because we've been involved with 3 National Register buildings. The Lime Cook Kilns isn't exactly a building, but we are responsible for that. And the Clinton Engine Building, and the Lamont Depot that you saw there. I went online this morning because this is constantly changing, but online it tells us that the state of Iowa has 2,024 listings on the National Register. And there's 99 counties, so that's 22.7 per county. That's the average of what a county would have. Jackson County, because of the work of this group of people particularly, Jackson County has 76. A lot more than the average 22. So you can see that the wonderful work that they have done in preserving our history. According to this site, the first site in Jackson County listed was in 1976, and it was the William Seneca Mill, or Costello's Mill out here. The last one, I believe, is the building that you're sitting in right now that we added to the National Register in 2006. It was just 50 years old, just kind of made the cut. So that was really nice. Also, just so you know, the Lamont Depot was removed from the National Register when we moved it from its original place. It is still eligible for the National Register because there's 3 criteria. Well, original location, we kind of fixed that, but we had to, or it was going to be destroyed. But it's still eligible because of its architecture and because of its historical significance. So hopefully one day when we get all the plantings in place and everything, that can go back on the National Register. And then I just wanted to ask you what you've noticed that might have changed since this film was. 30 years ago, and we're lucky to have it. Well, so lucky to have these pictures, but what did you notice that maybe is missing? Harley?
Lucille's house is gone on Pleasant Street.
Absolutely, that beautiful Dunham house that burned, what, 2 years ago?
Yeah.
2 years ago, that burned. That, just such a tragic loss to our community. What else isn't there?
The D.H. Anderson building was the Hallmark store. The house, though, is up towards the middle school, right?
Right. So
That
we're
was
missing that. I don't know whether the High Bridge was taken down, correct? So the High Bridge, that was so beautiful. I think it's down. I think that the Bluff Mills Bridge, we managed to keep, and they built the new one next to it, but I might be wrong, I think the High Street Bridge is gone. What else did you notice that might be different? Anything else? I was surprised that in the movie they didn't have the 2 Seville houses, the Captain Jeremiah Wood house, that big limestone house overlooking the Mississippi, and the house that our former board member who moved away rejected, the Dominy house that he restored, also on the National Register. Neither one of those were in the film.
I was surprised too that the original site of the Bellevue War, because we had owned that building and it was on the National
Okay.
Register. So I was surprised that
That wasn't included.
wasn't included.
Yeah. So there's just, just some differences through the years, but I just think we all need to be grateful to this group of people that in 1993 did such a wonderful job. They worked hard. Nancy,
Well, I think it said in there that it was the first one.
what was the first one?
This was the first video. So
Okay.
I gathered from that they were gonna do more.
Oh, okay. And I don't know that they did. I mean, certainly things have been done since, but the grants that they got paid for the survey. That was the important thing. And that was intensive. People from the state, from all around came and were involved in that. And upstairs in the files are the results of that. So that's what enabled these things to then go on the National Register and all that sort of thing. So they did a wonderful job. So it was just an amazing thing. So anyway, anybody have anything else to add? Please remember we're going to be talking about tornadoes next week, and that should be really, really interesting. So thank you all for coming.